within RCS based out of Annapolis. And I'll be presenting today on the job safety and biosecurity. All right, so we'll touch on a few things. We'll talk a little about field work, safety, active construction sites. Again, we'll get into some biosecurity. And of course, I can't do a presentation without talking about policy. So let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off and jump right into the policy off the bat. All right, so I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of OSHA in some capacity. So OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They're essentially the regulating agency responsible for safety of American workers. Regulation is codified in Title 29 of the CFR, or the Code of Federal Regulations. So basically granting OSHA the authority needed to administer safety. The parts that we're going to be concerned with, or that we're going to focus on, will be parts 1910, which provides general industry safety guidelines. And there's a specific section within part 1910 that talks about construction. And then 1926, that's the part where it's wholly dedicated to construction safety. So as always, NRCS has its own agency policy. So OSHA is the overarching authority when it comes to safety, but we also have agency-specific guidelines, which you'll see listed here on the right. So just briefly, general manual provides policy just in general. Handbooks, they provide specifications or how-tos, provides guidance. So the general manual part, Title 110, Part 402, provides safety and health standards for non-NRCS employees. The National Engineering Handbook, Part 645, it provides some guidance on construction inspection. The NRCS supplement to OSHA, which is also incorporated in Chapter 4 of Part 645, provides specific guidance when we have federal contracts. Then you'll see a general manual, Part 403 talks about biosecurity, and then just overall safety as it relates to NRCS staff is given in Part 420 of the general manual, Title 360. All right, again, so Part 1926 of OSHA, this is your construction safety guidelines. It's broken up into 26 subparts from A to X, subpart A through X. And I pulled out a few here that may be of interest to us with conservation work. So let's see, subpart E. I know we've all heard plenty about PPE lately with the COVID-19 pandemic. But PPE is a term broadly used for safety in general, protective equipment. Let's see, subpart I talks about power tools, hand tools. Subpart K will give you some electrical safety guidelines. Subpart O, motor vehicles. Subpart P gives guidance on excavation. Let's see, subpart X, stairwells and ladders. So again, these are a few of the subparts pulled out. If we're doing work and we have any of these items going on, or any of these types of work, this is where we will look for the information pertaining to those items. OSHA applies to all employers. So by OSHA, definition of an employer is anyone who has one or more employees. It also goes a little more in detail and says any person engaged in agricultural activity employing one or more employees is governed by OSHA. And for the agricultural sector, it excludes members of the immediate family. So a farmer's sister or father or members of the immediate family, they aren't considered employees, and technically aren't required to follow OSHA. Contractors in general, regardless of how many employees they have, they're governed by OSHA. They have to meet OSHA safety requirements. NRCS staff, partner staff, we're all governed by OSHA. All right, so who's responsible for what when it comes to on-the-job safety? So general contractor is responsible for overall safety on a construction site. The contractor, they're required to comply with those parts that we talked about earlier, 1910 and 1926. They're supposed to provide training to their staff, make sure that they know what those safety requirements are, depending on the type of work that they're involved in. They need to have first aid on site, or if they don't have first aid or first aid isn't able to get it done, they need to make sure that folks injured on site get medical attention. They need to keep records and they need to report incidents. What's our responsibility as conservationists? Generally, we're supposed to make sure that the landowner knows that, hey, you're supposed to follow these safety guidelines. Responsibility is going to vary depending on the working relationship. Uh, so depending on the type of contract or arrangements that we have with a client is going to determine our level of responsibility. Generally, yeah, we want to make sure that work is being conducted in a safe manner, and we want to make sure that we're providing the landowner with enough information and guidance that they feel comfortable in getting the work done and making sure that that work is being conducted in a safe manner. So generally, the three types of contracts we have are going to be federal contracts, your non-federal contracts, and then other. So your federal contracts, these are contracts that the federal government, we hire someone or some entity to perform a service for the government. So we're awarding a contract to someone to provide us with a service. That's a federal contract. In those types of arrangements, we have what's called a contracting officer. And the contracting officer is they have complete authority over contracts and will include safety clauses referencing OSHA and also agency specific clauses. Non-federal contracts, those are contracts that we have a relationship with a third party, for instance, a sponsor, and the sponsor hires a contractor to provide a service. So those are generally in the form of agreements. In those instances, the sponsor is responsible for making sure that safety guidelines are adhered to. They could ask us or assign us, if that's part of the agreement, to ensure that safety is adhered to via construction specs or other safety clauses, or they could choose to make sure that they're doing that on their part. Now, the other contracts, these are the ones that are more typical to the type of work that we do. So these are going to be your arrangements or contracts between private landowners and contractors. So these contracts don't have to be written, they can be verbal. But in those instances, again, the contractor is responsible. But us as conservationists, NRCS partners, we should make sure that the landowner understands and the contractor understands what those safety guidelines are. All right, let's talk about construction a little bit. So Call before you dig, 811. General, anytime you're doing any type of excavation, we want to make sure that we have this 811 notification symbol and make sure that the landowner knows that, hey, you need to call a utility company before we start digging. You know, they'll let you know if there's anything on site, or they'll come out and mark it if there is. We do have a note placed on all of our engineering plans. If you look at the templates on the cover sheet, you'll see this symbol front and center. Again, it's the landowner's responsibility. Yeah, we're acting in a consultative role and trying to advise the landowner and also the contractor of safety practices. But in those other type contracts, those non-federal contracts, arrangements between the producer and the contractor, landowner's responsibility. All right. During construction, a lot of times there's heavy equipment on site. Now we're talking about excavators, loaders, um, trucks, haul trucks, heavy equipment. Certain things we need to do when we're on construction sites where there's equipment being used like this. Again, PPE. By OSHA, we're required to wear hard hats and safety vests at a minimum when we're on sites with active construction sites with heavy equipment. Um, I think last year we shipped at least 2 hard hat safety vests to each field office. So if you don't have any, you need to make sure that we get you all some safety vests and hard hats. Don't stand on any swinging loads. You're on site, just try to avoid that. Always let the foreman know you're on site. The foreman is going to be the crew leader. They're supervising or they're leading the workers on site. First thing you do at the construction site, make sure they know you're there, because they're ultimately responsible for safety on site. They need to know who's coming, who's going. If there are incidents, they need to be able to report that. So let them know. Yeah, I hope that this doesn't need to be said, but uh, actually, Steve mentioned this the other day, and I said, yeah, I probably should put that in there. So don't ride in excavator buckets. You'll see that picture. The bucket. I've seen people ride on these many times. If you look at this picture, hey, I want to get up slope. Instead of walking up, you hop in the bucket, try to take a shortcut. Don't take shortcuts. That's how injuries happen, accidents occur. Stay out of the way of active equipment. They're working, they're focused, they're not always paying attention to what you're doing on site. So stay out of their way. If you must go into the way of work, make sure you get eye contact with them before going. All right, some more construction safety. Trenching. This is a big one. We do a lot of trench work, particularly with a lot of our engineering practices. So a trench is defined as an excavation whose depth is deeper than the width. So when the width is less than 15 feet measured at the bottom of the trench. Big thing to remember with trenches, dealing with trenches 5 feet or deeper, you need to have some type of safety mechanism. For trenches, your safety protection would include sloping, which sloping means if you look on the pictures, the face of the trench, it should be going away from the bottom. So you'll see a lot of times we'll have a recommended side slope, 1-to-1 side slope. That's an example of sloping. Benching. I don't have an illustration of that here, but benching is essentially creating a stepping system. So it looks just like stairs. Picture a set of stairs on the side of your trench. And then also shoring. So if you look to the bottom right corner of your screen, I've included an illustration of trench boxes. These are an example of shoring. And again, OSHA, forget the subpart that deals with excavation. It's gonna give you your guidelines for trench safety, and it gives you different design options up to a depth of 20 feet. Beyond that, then you need to have it designed by a licensed engineer. All right. So your sloping protection is going to depend on the type of soil you have. You know, type of soil is going to determine the slope, the soil, the stability of your soil. So if we don't have these mechanisms, they can be fatal. People die in trenches all the time. You can look online and put in trench failures, and you'll see all kinds of things. I intentionally did not include any uh, glaring images here, but they can be fatal. So keep that in mind when you're on site and you're working around trenches with trenches. Uh, 5 feet or more, you need to have some type of protection. Not to say that things can't happen in trenches shallower than 5 feet, but by OSHA, you're required to have it at those depths. All right, let's switch gears. So let's talk about safety in general while doing field work. So doing I&E, inventory and evaluation, site visits, topographic surveys, or any other field work that we might be doing out there on the site. Be vigilant. Be aware of your surroundings. You're out in the field, out in the real world, things can happen. You know, you're not isolated. Just be aware of your surroundings and act accordingly. Use your best judgment. So I know a lot of times we'll be out and we may be with folks that are pretty adventurous, maybe a little more adventurous than you. Some may be more apt to risk taking. Don't let them influence you and encourage you to do something that you probably shouldn't do. And when in doubt, err on the side of caution. You don't want to do something out there that you're going to regret doing later. All right. So vehicle operation, we all use them. We going out to the site. What do you take? Do you take a two-wheel drive vehicle or a four-wheel drive vehicle? You probably take whatever's available, right? But just think about it. These things to consider. You're going out to the site. What are you looking at? What's the terrain like? Is the site wet? Is it mushy? Are there paved surfaces or hardened surfaces? What type of vehicle do you need? Yeah, you can get injured. You can get injured depending on the type of vehicle you have, but you don't want to get stuck out on the site. You get stuck out somewhere, have limited cell reception. Uh, no one knows where you are, which you should always let folks know you're going in the field and where you're going. But you get stuck late in the day. No cell reception. It can be problematic. Now, ATV safety. So I know NRCS we don't have ATVs and UTVs in Maryland, at least to my knowledge. But I'm told that some of our partners they do have ATVs, UTVs that they utilize on sites. So this is for you all. This ATVs they're a great alternative to normal vehicles or traditional vehicles. They allow you to access parts of sites that you may not have access to in a regular vehicle. They're convenient. They're easy to hop in and out, hop on and off. but they can be dangerous. So some things to consider if you are utilizing these vehicles. Again, PPE. You're going to hear that from me throughout this presentation. PPE associated with ATVs include helmets, gloves, things, clothing that covers your skin. I mean, long sleeves, pants, closed toe shoes, eye protection. You want to, if you do fall or you scrape something, you want to have some type of barrier between you and your body. It's a really good idea to take an ATV safety course. Now, again, in RCS, we don't have any UTV ATVs, and then I worked in the field in North Carolina and Florida. We use both. We use ATVs and UTVs all the time to complete topographic surveys. And there it was you had to have an ATV certification in order to use those vehicles. Um, Again, being that we don't have those vehicles here, we being NRCS, I highly encourage our partners to take ATV safety courses if you aren't already doing so. I don't know, you may be doing that, but if not, you should definitely do so. Use the vehicle for what it's rated for. If you've got an ATV rated for one person, don't have people on the handlebars. Don't have anybody else on there with you. You're setting yourself up for sticky situations. Stay off of public roads as much as possible. If you got all kinds of vehicles on public roads, these aren't designed for that. And operate the vehicles at speeds that you're comfortable with. All right, another thing we see a lot out in the field are stream crossings. You going out to the site, always good. Ask the landowner, hey, how do you get over there? If they say, hey, we just ride through it, then you may say, okay, let's just ride through it. But again, use your best judgment. So only cross at stable locations and avoid crossing when water levels are high or when the current appears to be swift.
Hey,
All
Jaquette,
right.
just to check in, you got a couple more minutes.
All right, good. I was just going to ask you how I was doing on time. All right, so we won't get into it too much here because I do want to touch on biosecurity briefly. But just in general, I know we've been kind of quiet today. I was going to get some public participation, some group participation, but I guess you're all off the hook because I'm running out of time. So I'll just point out a couple of things. How about the athlete jumping over the ditch? Is there anything there? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he's gonna clear it without any issues. Or maybe he overestimated his athleticism. uh, Again, use your best judgment. We work with a lot of livestock producers that use fencing to rotate their cattle. Be aware, some fences are live. Make sure that you are aware of that and you're not touching anything that is live. And if you are touching electric lines, make sure that they're off. All right, let's move on so that we can get to a few other things here. All right, so biosecurity. Broadly, is defined as anything designed to prevent the transfer of disease-causing organisms. APHIS, they're the lead agency when it comes to biosecurity. So we consult with them. They provide guidance on how to deal with certain outbreaks or certain diseases or whatever the case may be with animals or plants. Good practice. Before you go out to a site, find out if there are any biosecurity protocols. There's levels to it. Level 0, there's no perceived threat. Go out, business as usual. Level 1, there's a perceived threat, but there's no direct contact. So there are certain things you have to do with level 1. You need to wear clean clothes, clean footwear, park in designated areas, keep windows closed, keep the bugs out, keep particulates out, keep the germs on site. Then at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you remove any debris from your floorboards and disinfect with an EPA approved disinfectant. Level 2, there is a perceived threat with minimal contact. Minimal contact with animals, manure, animal facilities, growing crops, plants, etc. Level 2, you need to follow all the things that you do in level 1. In addition, you have to do these other things. Some things of note, you need to wear either rubber boots or booties, disposable booties. You need to have certain items so that you can make sure to clean yourself and your vehicle. Level 3, again, level 3, if there's a level 3 threat, we may need to consider, how we can provide service. Do we physically need to go in this location or close to these locations, or can we provide assistance a different way? If we must go out there, then we need to do these things. All the things required in level 2. And additionally, you need to wear a coverall, so your whole body needs to be covered. Once you're done, you need to remove those things in a manner where it's inside out. And I'm hearing dinging. I guess that means my time is up. Last but not least,
It always comes down to understanding the schedule.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So that's really all I had. And I'm over my time, so I'll yield back to Steve, unless there are any questions.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. If anybody has any questions for